So this is part 2 of our trip about building our replica Chitty Chitty Bang Bang and then driving it right across the world to Australia. And you know, a little bit of a summary really. We've done part 1, but basically we built this replica Chitty based on a 1973 long wheelbase Land Rover, and it cost me £100, which was a real bargain. And you know, it took us a lot of head scratching to turn this 1973 old Land Rover full of rust into what you now see as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and actually make it quite roadworthy, pass the DVLA, pass all the regulations for getting an MOT and so on and so forth, and then actually embarking on this amazing trip across the world, which was fantastic. So I think I got to the point before with my wife about we were building up to, we'd finished the car, we'd got it together, we'd done the aluminium and the wood and the brass, and we found bits of Bewley Auto Jumper and so on and so forth. And we had lots of trials and tribulations, and it really felt like were people taking us seriously, because you were talking about building a flying car from a kid's movie, and you know, were you really going to pull this off, and then were you going to drive it across the world? Seemed absolutely bonkers. But anyway, we had a launch party where we invited 200 people to the garden, and we danced and we sang and we unveiled the car, and it went down a real treat. It was absolutely stunning, and it was a real emotional time, I have to say. But we still had to get an MOT. We had to get it legal. It was in April, and we were planning to go in September. So we had, you know, it had like 5 or 6 months, and we needed visas. I needed to, I mean, it'd be sensible, wouldn't it? You know, this car was, well, now it's coming up nearly 50 years old, and I hadn't even looked at the engine. I hadn't changed the oil. I hadn't done anything. So it would be sensible to actually put it into a Land Rover garage and get them to give it a once over. I thought that'd be a good idea. And also, you know, it's a long way away to drive across the world in the rain, and it hasn't got a roof. So I had to design a roof to fit onto the car. And then how many spares do you take? You know, what do you do? How much luggage do you take? Do you take starter motors and points and plugs and a spare wheel, all this sort of stuff? But I didn't know really where I was going to fit it on the car. So I had to design a rack, a big aluminium rack that would fit on the boat tail of Chitty, but not damage the boat tail or affect it at all, but just sit on the back, so it was quite discreet. So if it was thick tube, you could have less of it, less tubing as it were, because it would be quite thick. And then by having that, I would know exactly how much room I would have, and to put my spares, jerry cans, luggage and so on. So we had a rack to do, we had to check the car over, we had a roof to build, we had visas and injections and all that sort of stuff to do. And as I left it at part 1, we had no money. I mean, we seriously had no money. Whatever we had spent on building the car. And although the car wasn't a massive expenditure, because we were, you know, quite resourceful in finding things and adapting things, you know, even these bits here, they're what I found in a bucket at Bewley, and gave them a good old brass polish on the brass. And then this bit here, the inner bit, is actually the lampstand base of a lampstand that I found at Marks and Spencer's for £9, and I bought 2 of them, which was really handy. And even this bit's a bit of a lampstand, and a bit down here's a bit of a lampstand, and a bit of a tea light, and you know, whatever we could find really. So where were we going to go, and how we were going to pull this off in 6 months seemed a bit of a challenge. So I had to address the bit about money first of all. Now, we got to August and we were going in September, and in August I applied for a loan on the mortgage for a kitchen that we never had. And how much do you apply for? I mean, I don't know. At the time we applied for £15,000. I don't know, it seemed a lot of money at the time. I wasn't sure if that would last, but I couldn't afford to borrow any more. So we put £15,000 on the mortgage for a kitchen we never had. Anyway, so we had the money, but that was in August, so we were really leaving it quite fine. But with this £15,000, I then had to decide what was I gonna, how much was I gonna do to the car, and how many spares I'm gonna buy, and extra things for the trip, because that's all going to come out of that money that's going to last us a whole year for two of us, and fuel, and to drive across the world, and so on and so forth. So it was quite in the fine balance, really. Anyway, as we get through August, we've managed to rent out our house, and that's great. We've now got somebody who's now paying our mortgage, so we don't have to worry about that anymore. We take career breaks from work, and we both have 12 months off. You don't get paid, but you don't lose your job, so that's brilliant. We've got the time off now, and we go and move in with my mother-in-law, so we've got somewhere to live. But we kept the garage, and so we kept the Chitty in the garage, and we tipped her across the lawn where we've rented the house out, so that we could come and work on the car and so on. And they were really supportive. In fact, they were that supportive. Brilliant people. They looked after our cats for the time that we went away. So not only did they rent the house, but they looked after our cats, and we had 7 cats, so that's quite an undertaking. So good on them, really. But anyway, that made life really easy for us. And then, as we're getting close to the date, I design on the computer a rack, big aluminium rack with only 4 mounting points, so it's really simple to go on and off. And I find a small engineering works who work in aluminium, and I give them all the plans, and I've done it on the computer, so it should be spot on. And I asked them to do it. Now, it was going to cost about £700–800, which is quite a lot of money out of my £15,000. And I don't know how long it was going to take, but until the rack went on, I had no idea what I could take. Also, I go ahead and I build myself a cab, a roof, out of ash wood. Because traditionally old cars were made out of, frames were made out of ash wood, and then it had an aluminium skin, so that's exactly what I did for the roof. But because I'd built it out of ash and aluminium, it really wasn't very waterproof, so I did give it a road test and went out, and we got wet. So there's a guy called Jim the Trim, lovely bloke. He didn't work far from where we lived, and I went down to see him, and I said, look, could you make me a vinyl roof for this? And he was very clever, ex Rolls Royce upholsterer, so he knew his stuff. Anyway, he measured it all up, and you know, this is August, bearing in mind that we are leaving on the 12th of September. That was a Wednesday. And so anyway, he measures it all up, says, yeah, he'll do that for us. I order some spares, but I'm not really sure how many I can take yet. And then I go ahead and I drop the car off to the Land Rover garage. Now, this is a real big step, because until I could actually drive it on the road to get to the garage, I had to wait until I'd heard from DVLA to see that this car would be legal on the road as Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, because it obviously had been heavily modified. And on the particular day that the guy came, he was a lovely old boy, and there was a few concerns because there was no chassis number, because it had been re-welded and there was no number there. And he looked at me and said, you really don't want this to fail, but it's not down to me. And I thought, well, who is it down to then? Anyway, he said, you'll only know when you get the registration document back. And that was a few months where we sweated it out, but finally it did arrive, and it was reclassified as a Land Rover Tourer, so it had passed. And then I had to go and do my MOT, which was a slight disaster, because I drove to the MOT station, which was the first time I'd driven it anywhere, and one of the wheels nearly fell off, and I really panicked. And when I looked, I realised I hadn't done the wheel nuts up, which is, in my haste, a bit of a bad move. But anyway, we did it all up, managed to get to the garage, passed the MOT. So now I could drive this to the Land Rover garage to give it a good once over. Anyway, I left it with them, and then I got a phone call, and it was not good news. They said, you realise your rear diff, your rear axle is completely shot. I am really surprised that you drove this car to the garage. That axle is absolutely shot. I'm amazed that you got here. So I was really concerned, you know, what was this going to cost? Anyway, I said, look, I've got access to an ex-army rear axle. It's going to cost 150 quid. But what I didn't know at the time is going to cost about 500-600 quid to fit it, with labour and bits and bobs and extra oils and so on and so forth. So I was really devastated because, you know, time was marching on, and we had actually now got to the beginning of September. So I finally go down to pick up the car after they put the new axle on, and I must say I am really stressed. You know, we're going to go across the world for a year in a car that I've built, and the rear axle doesn't even work. Well, anyway, they've done a brilliant job and they put the axle in, and on the day I went to pick it up, he looked at me and said, you know, the axle's done. He said, but you know your clutch is gone. And I tell you what, my heart sank. You know, this was, now as I recall, this was on the weekend, the Thursday or the Friday before the Wednesday that we were going to leave. So I had to drop that car down there on the Friday, and they were going to try and get to it as soon as they could, but we were leaving on the Wednesday, so they could put a new clutch in after they've already put a new axle on. And I was thinking, God, what is the state of this car? You know, because I've done nothing to the mechanics. I've just made it look beautiful. But anyway, I made some arrangements to get it sorted. So whilst it's there and they're having the clutch done, I ring up the guy who's making the rack for me. And, you know, they've done a brilliant job. No, without, you know, credit to them. It was lovely. But I said, oh, I'll come up and pay then, and could you drop it off? And they said, oh, look, we're really busy, unfortunately, but and delivery's not included in the price. Which, you know, fair comment, but I was really stressed. You know, we had a car each, my wife and I, and we'd sold them both. In fact, my car was so old, I drove it to the scrapyard. Because we were going away for a year and obviously didn't need it anymore. I drove it to the scrapyard. They weighed it, and I got £30 for it, and I caught the bus home. But so we didn't have any vehicles now. All we had was Chitty, and Chitty was in the garage having a clutch done. And you know, this is a weekend before we're going away for a whole year. Anyway, we have a bit of a haggle over the phone, and I said, well, look, could you fit it? If I get the car after the clutch, could you fit it? And the guy said, well, look, we haven't really got time. Fitting's not included in the price. So I was really stressed, you know, so I left it there. Didn't really know how I was going to sort this one out. But after the weekend, I get the clutch done on the car, and I pay a bit more money for it, which I hadn't accounted for, out of the £15,000 that I'm going away for the whole year. Anyway, we get the car, and I drive it down to Jim the Trim, who's been doing the roof, and I think this was the Monday now. Yeah, on the Monday, and he fits the roof for me. No, actually, tell a lie. It was it was Monday. But anyway, he fits the roof for me, and it looks lovely, and it's waterproof, and we've got roll down windows, poppers on, and so on, and it's about 5 to 5 at the end of the day. So I'm really pleased. I pay him, which actually was a big chunk of money, because he'd done a lot of work, and it was a real bespoke job, and I was really pleased with it. But it was a lot of work, a lot of money. Anyway, out of me £15,000. Anyway, so I drive away, and as I get into third gear, up into fourth, and then the wind on the cab, and the whole roof just rips off, and all the fixings aren't man enough to hold it on, and I was, you know, I had to stop in the road, run out and go and pick up the roof, and I was devastated. You know, I just paid for this roof, and I turned round and went back to the garage, Jim the Trim, to see him, and he'd gone home. He'd finished work. So I caught up with him, rang him up, and he said, look, don't worry. He said, we're sorted out straight away, bring it back tomorrow. He said, I've got special clips that will twist and it won't come off. Which we did the next day, put them all on, and it was great. It was brilliant, you know. But for a moment, I thought I was going to have a roof as waterproof as a fishnet stocking, you know. But this certainly ticked the box. So we got that all sorted, and paid for the clutch, got the car back, you know, that's all sorted, and now it's just the rack. Now this is Tuesday, and we are leaving on the Wednesday morning. And I ring the guy up again, and we have a bit of a little haggle over the phone, and finally they'd agree, because they know, you know, they've read in the paper, there's been a little bit of TV stuff with us, local news and so on. They know what we're doing, so they said, look, okay, fine, we'll deliver it. So thankfully they dropped it off on the back of a BOC lorry on that morning. And it was a lovely day. It was a really nice sunny day, and I laid all my spares out and all our luggage out on the floor, and I got this rack and I bolted it on, and it was only 8 bolts, you know, 4 fixing points but 8 bolts, and then I started to put the jerry cans in, and you know, they wouldn't fit like I wished them to. So we had an old cupboard, like you have in a kitchen cupboard, and there's like a chrome drawer, a chrome framed drawer that used to put vegetables in. Well, I took this out, and this looked a great little rack that I bolted on top of the rack, and it held the jerry cans and tools perfectly in a nice wicker basket. So I managed to get that all on there, and I thought, you know, Tuesday, we're going tomorrow morning, I need to give it a road test. So I loaded up the car. We had one rucksack between me and my wife for a whole year. Bless her, she didn't even take a hairdryer or anything, you know. But one rucksack, I put a starter motor, an alternator, all my tools, 2 jerry cans, cooking stove, all the bits and bobs, kettles. I mean, my wife didn't take she didn't take a hairdryer, but I managed to get 3 kettles, which she wasn't impressed about. I mean, I had a kettle that was on the cigarette lighter, so that was one, and then I had a proper one that went on the burner. But I also had this thing called a Kelly kettle, and they're brilliant. They're like Bushman's kettles, because it's like a skin where the water sits in this skin, but down the middle you put paper, and you can start a fire just on paper, and it boils the water. So they're very, very efficient. So I bought this Kelly kettle thinking, if we're in the middle of the outback somewhere, at least we can have a nice cup of tea. So anyway, I had 3 kettles. I had to find room for that. So I load all the luggage up, and we go off for a road test. First road test, and as I get up into 4th gear again and I start driving, got the cab on and everything, and I can see the whole rack that I've designed is just flexing like this. I've got the spare wheel on Chitty is big, chunky, you know, and I made a special fixing point for it to go on the back of this rack. But it's so heavy that as we drove and went over bumps, you could see the rack just flexing like this. And where the joints are, where it's bolted to, it's welded, and you can just see like hairline cracks in the weld where it joins the metal. And I thought, this will not last 5 minutes. So the spare wheel was so heavy, I had to take it off. And you know what? We didn't take one. I mean, that was a real gamble. I rushed out and bought a can of tyre weld and a repair kit, which you push into the wheel with a big spike with a bit of rubber and glue. I don't know how well that works or not, but I was going to take it. And some tyre levers. How I ever thought I would get a tyre off a Land Rover wheel, I don't know. But anyway, I took them anyway, put them on the car. So we couldn't take the spare wheel, so a bit of luck really. You keep your fingers crossed. And then, so, you know, we had the roof, it was now waterproof, we had a rack, and we had all the tools on there. But that evening, I stayed up quite late in the garage, and I changed the oil, I changed the oil filter, I changed the spark plugs, I put a new K&N air filter on there, because I'd taken the old oil bath one away, new K&N air filter. I had an extra set of points, an extra set of plugs, and I just thought, well, that's the best I can do. You know, I've changed the oil, it's got a new lease of life. I have no idea the condition and how well it's going to bear, but you know, we're on a mission, and we said we're going to go, so we're going to go. Now, one of the biggest questions that I was asked over and over again when we were talking about we were going to go across the world, we're going to drive this car and so on and so forth, they'd always say, everybody would always say, yeah, what happens if you break down? And I go, no, that's fine. If we break down, it will be all part of the adventure. And it would, you know, I mean, whatever happens, if you break down, it's part of the adventure, wherever you're on the world. And I did have the AA, but I only had the AA for, I had the AA for Britain, whilst we were in Britain, but I didn't have it for Europe at all, or the world. I just had it here whilst we were here. So I thought, well, As long as I've got AA cover, I've got my visas, my passports, some plenty of money. I had $2,000 in my back pocket. I don't know how much money we needed in cash, I had some euros. But you know, there's a lot of places that won't take any money, like Iran. You have to have US dollars, so that's what I thought I'd take. So we're all packed up, all ready to go, and I've changed all the oils. And this thing about would I break down, you know, it was all part of the adventure. But I'd always end it by saying, as long as it isn't in Britain, in England. You know, if I broke down in England on the way to the ferry, that would be the biggest disaster going. Doesn't matter once I'm abroad, but if I couldn't even get out of Britain, that would be awful. Anyway, we go to mother-in-law's, we sleep, wake up nice and early, next morning, and we're both really nervous, don't want any breakfast. You know, we're going away for a year. Our son's just joined the Royal Navy, he's only 17, but he's looked after. Our daughter's gone to stay with relatives, and she's going to fly out to Australia when we get there. But there's lots of mixed emotions. You know, you've rented your house and the cats, and it's probably the most insecure time in both of our lives ever, just before we're about to embark on this adventure. Now, we've got no idea where we're going. I know that sounds really silly, but we're driving across the world, and all I've got is a little P&O pocket atlas that I stuck in the dashboard. And I thought, well, I don't know, we know we're sort of going to go through Europe, and we're going to head to Asia and India, and then down to Australia or wherever. But we didn't plan anything, and it wasn't that we didn't want to plan anything, it's just we ran out of time. We spent so much time building the car and making it into this beautiful Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and a little bit of time on sorting the engine and the running gear and so on, and sorting the house and the children and the cats and all that. And it was such and career breaks, we just ran out of time about planning where we were going. But I think in hindsight, that was probably for the best, because this is why it made it such an adventure. So we meet at the ferry at, I don't know, 8 o'clock in the morning. I think we're on the 9 o'clock boat or whatever. And there's quite a few people there to send us off, you know, and I'm really humbled by this. These people are gathered round, and they're gonna see us off from the Isle of Wight. They read it in the local paper, in the County Press, and seen a bit on the news. And so lots of well wishers. And the guy who's directing the traffic onto the ferry comes up to me and says, "Now, you want to go on the port side, don't you?" I said, "Do I?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "You're going port out, starboard home, aren't you?" Now this was amazing, because obviously if you're familiar with the film Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, there's a song in there, port out, starboard home. And port out, starboard home, port out because it goes back to the days of the sailing boats, the steamships that used to go to India from Britain and so on, and they would go on the port side of the ship because it was cooler, it was away from the sun, because the sun's in the south, which would be the starboard side. But if you came back, the ship turned round, so you had to swap sides, so it was port out, starboard home, going posh. And that's why it was now you had to have a little bit more money to go posh, because it costs more, and that's why posh is called posh, from port out, starboard home. Anyway, the guy directed us onto the boat, says, "You're going on the port side." And I said, "Yeah, great, thank you." So I was really touched that they put us on the port side of the ferry. Now, unbeknown to me, I didn't know my wife had gone down a week earlier to arrange this, to make sure that when we left on our big trip, we'd be going on the port side. And you know what? When we came back, we did come back on the starboard side too. Anyway, so as we drive onto the ferry, say all the goodbyes, lots of tears with parents and so on, and it was really very emotional time. And as we get on the ferry, as we're driving on the gangway, either side there's a row of well wishers, all with Union Jacks and flags and clapping, and God, I just thought, I really need to do it now. You know, got all this great big expectation of people. But it was lovely to be waved off like that. So we get onto the ferry, and we get over to Portsmouth and Southsea, and over there's a photographer, and they're waiting. They want to do a story. So we're in a real. We want to get going. You know, we want to get started, because we're only in Portsmouth, and we go to Southsea Common, and they take loads of photos and do an interview and a chit chat, and we're just like, oh, we want to get going. But anyway, they do all this and we drive off onto the motorway. Now this is the first time I've driven this car really anywhere. And as we drive towards Dover, we go to Maidstone Services. And as I pull in to the Maidstone Services, I get this horrendous rumble from under the car. And is it a wheel bearing? Is it the prop shaft? Is it the gearbox? I don't know, some horrendous noise. And I really panic. And I think, I can't believe it. We're breaking down in England. We haven't even got to Dover. And so I really panic and I ring up the AA straight away, because I've got the AA in Britain. And we wait for a whole hour. And this AA van pulls up right over the far side of the car park, right next to a Land Rover, an old Land Rover. And I have to run over there, get over to this bloke and say, listen mate, it's not that Land Rover, it's this one over here in drag. Anyway, he comes over, takes a good look at it, and you know, he's a lovely guy, a bloke called Bob Lacey, works for the AA, just a smashing guy, and he used to be a mechanic for in the army, and he worked on all these old series Land Rovers, so he knew everything about them. And he went over it, he couldn't do enough for us. He went, you know, checked the wheel bearing, looked at the prop and did everything, and he said, do you know what, there's nothing wrong with it. And I went, yeah, but it made all this horrible noise and it did this and it did that and it was really bad. And he said, listen, he said, when they're a bit old, he said, when they get hot, they rumble, they make all sorts of things. He said, it'll be fine. I said, yeah, but he said, listen, it will be fine. I've worked on these all my life. He said, they will be fine. It won't let you down. Just, it'll be great. He said, but I can see you're a bit, you know what you're doing. You're a bit panicked about it. He says, I'll follow you now for the next 20 miles to the next service station. And we'll just see how you get on. So I thought that was amazing service from the AA. And they followed me all the way to the service station. When we get there, he says, look, I need to do the paperwork now. So, you know, sign a few forms and so on. And he says to me, this is normally when I get a tip. He said, but on this occasion, mate, there's 20 quid for fuel for you because I'm so impressed with what you're doing. So I got 20 quid from the AA man for fuel. I was so impressed. What a guy. And Bob Lacey, good on you. Now I've just come in from the garage just before I round up Overland to Australia Part 2. It's absolutely hammering it down with the weather out there, and we've got a tin roof in the garage, so it's getting really loud. But anyway, I have to say that when we got just towards Dover, you know, there was a few panics there with the car what I thought was breaking down, and we were bailed out with the AA, which was fantastic. But we were really insecure. You know, we were about to embark on this year's adventure across the world, and we didn't really know where we were going, and it felt like a complete whirlwind. And were we doing the right thing? You know, were the cats, were the kids, were the house, everything sorted? But we were so committed, and we were there. This was it. We were about to board the ferry. Now, you know, there was a little bit of a tension at the ferry port. You know, lots of people were around the car and were really interested in where we were going, what we were doing. But all I could think about was, where were we going to camp tonight? You know, we had no idea at all. And we got on the ferry, and then the thought of the AA started to sort of ring alarm bells, because I hadn't got the AA in Europe or the rest of the world. Well, I don't think you can get it in the rest of the world, but I know you can get it in Europe. So we embarked on the ferry, and as the ferry went out from Dover, it was now getting dark. So it had taken us all day with the photos and South Sea and the little breakdown, little hitch on the way, and now it was getting dark, and I panicked a little bit. So I rang up the AA on my mobile phone with a very poor intermittent signal as we were leaving Dover, and I decided to take advantage of European cover, which I think was for 4 weeks. And because the vehicle was so old, I thought it'd be like another 10 quid or something just to add it to my AA policy, but it wasn't. It was 230 quid. And because of what had happened, I really panicked, and I paid the £230 just to give me this extra little bit of cover. But in hindsight, I didn't need it. So it was another big chunk out of my £15,000 budget. But anyway, and we arrive in we arrive in Calais after leaving Dover a few hours later. Now it's midnight and it's pitch black, and we drive off that ferry and we've got no idea at all where we're going to park, where we're going to camp. And we drive around Calais and we finally find a campsite, and it's closed, but we knock on the door and they come out and they open the barrier up for us so they can get Chitty in, and they give us a little campsite lot, you know. We put our tent up, and we were both reflected, you know, that was the first night of a whole year of not knowing where we're going to be. And that was the start of every day. Every day was like that. We had no idea where we were going to be next. And because of that, that's what made it a complete adventure. And that randomness was just really full of the spice of life, and it was excellent. But we were both incredibly insecure and didn't know what was going to happen next. But that was really a great sense of adventure. So if you've enjoyed part 1 and part 2, and you'd like to see what happens in part 3 as we go across the world in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, it'd be great if you could like and subscribe to the channel. That'd be absolutely brilliant. And we've even got a book out online which is called Port Out Starboard Home. So thanks for watching.